By the end of this video, I have one goal, and that is to show you how I used a simple 5-step meditation from Dr. Joe Dispenza to go from $80,000 in debt in some of the worst shape of my life to making over 7 figures in my dream business and manifesting everything I wanted and more for a 25-year-old. Now, before we get into the actual video, I want to make sure that you guys grab your 5-step meditation workbook. It's going to be the first link in the description, and this is going to be an entire in-depth breakdown of all the information you need to use a 5-step meditation that I've come up with to let go of the old version of yourself and reprogram your subconscious mind and begin to manifest whatever you want. Now, I also want you to remember that I'm going to be live streaming tonight, Monday, 6:30 p.m. PST, and this is going to be an important one because there's going to be a special announcement on this live stream and you are not going to want to miss it. So let's get into the actual video. Now, I need to show you first how I let go of the old version of me, and then I'm going to show you how I use that meditation to brainwash myself into a state of abundance where 7 figures came to me effortlessly in less than 6 months. Now, before we get into that, I need to show you why change is so hard. I need to show you why your own mind and your own body fight back when you try to manifest a better life for yourself. So I want you to think of your entire biological ecosystem like this, right? We have the brain, we have the body, we have thoughts, and then we have emotions. I've been spending a lot of time touching up on Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, and the biggest thing I took away is that change can feel hard because our bodies become addicted to the feeling of being in a state of fight or flight. Now, what do I mean by that? Fight or flight are lower states of consciousness, okay? It is when we are experiencing anger, fear, guilt, scarcity, doubt. Now, the more consistently we feel that, right, when our brain creates certain thoughts that validate that certain experience and it sends a signal to our body, and that body creates a chemical response causing an emotion, which triggers our brain to fire off more thoughts, then we are creating a subconscious program. And this is why I said I need to show you how I let go of the old version of me. Because the old version of me was channeling a lot of negative things, right? I was smoking weed. I was partying. I was spending money on things I couldn't spend money on. I was in a downward spiral of energy. Because I was in a lower state of consciousness, the energy I was putting out in my thoughts and my emotions and my awareness and what I was focusing on was channeling that experience in my life. Now, I want to show you how we can let go of this old version of us because the lower states of consciousness actually drain our energetic battery, which is why change is so hard because these are life-sucking energies. Now, I need to show you how we can move beyond this old version of ourselves and step into a version of us that can manifest more abundance, more success, and more wealth and more love. But I want to show you the 3 areas in which the old you is going to fight for survival, right? Now, let's break it down with body, time, and environment. And we're just going to make this very simple, but it's very important to understand because these are the 3 ways in which your identity or the old you is going to seek to validate a familiar experience. Now, our body aims to maintain homeostasis, right? But if that familiar experience is thoughts and a reality of anger, doubt, fear, loss, and that's something we experience in every avenue of our life, then that is what our body is going to become programmed for. It's what it's going to become addicted to chemically, and then it is going to seek that out. It's going to seek that out in our body, right? Through our emotions and through how we feel, right? Because this is a chemical response, right? Your body becomes addicted to this chemical release, right? when your adrenaline's super high and you're in that stress state and you're in a state of fight or flight, your body becomes addicted to that chemical. Now, time is going to be something where we experience anxiety and doubt, because this is the timeline on which we want things to change, or the timeline in which our ego is looking to kind of validate the fact that we are not going to get what we want, right? Because you're like, oh my God, it's been 7 minutes. Why haven't I manifested this? Oh my God, Grant, it's been a week. Why haven't I manifested this? It's going to use time as a reason to validate your experience and your inability to change, just like it's going to use familiar emotions, feelings, and chemicals. Now, environment is another place where that stimuli is going to be. So, right, these can be friends. This can be a job. This can be a spouse. Now, all I want to validate for you right now is that this is an external frame of object referral, right? We talked about this in that other video, which means the ego is going to be looking for things in the body, in the time, or in your environment to validate a negative experience, because this is what it's become accustomed to. This is what it's become addicted to, right? So how do we move beyond this? And how do we use the 5-step meditation from Joe Dispenza to overcome this cycle, right? I was addicted to the feeling of shame and guilt when I would get high and I would eat unhealthy food. I was addicted to the fact that it would never work out, right? The time frame, I was like, it will never manifest. It will never be how it's supposed to be, Grant. You're never going to get out of this debt. Just like the environment. I would go to the same bars and see the same people, which validated the same experience, right? That's what my ego was latching onto. It was addicted to what this experience validated and kind of narrowed down the fact that it was looking to create that homeostasis more consistently in my life. Now, we need to understand that with meditation and our proper understanding of meditation, we can overcome this old version of ourselves. But there are two major things I need to tell you about meditation before I show you the actual practice and the actual point of meditation that will allow you to experience this change, right? If we can let go of the old you and we can step into the present moment, which is a new, unfamiliar experience, then you will allow the universal mind or the divine harmony to naturally repattern your subconscious, right? Because we are changing how you think, how you feel, there's going to be a natural repatterning, a natural harmony in which you start to seek that new experience out in the universe, right? But that's also something that goes down in the brain. It's the reticular activation system. But I need to show you guys what meditation actually is. So meditation, people think, is just entering these deep states where you can program the subconscious mind, or it's where you can just prove to yourself that there's no thoughts, which it is, right? You need to engage in that, but I want to show you the real stuff that allowed me personally to go from $80,000 in debt in some of the worst shape of my life to making over 7 figures in business. And what I subscribe to is the idea of a walking meditation, right? I'm just gonna put walking meditation, because this is where the knowledge and wisdom gets put into action. The whole point of meditation in general, whether you're sitting in silence or you're in a walking state of meditation, is to understand this. I showed you what your body is addicted to because what it's addicted to is an impulse, right? Your body is now the master. So it is looking to create an impulse of the mind in which you can go from thought to choice to action to experience to emotion, which eventually replicates the cycle and validates and imprints that homeostasis that your body is looking to replicate. But the whole point of meditation is to create a gap in between what we think and feel and the action we take, right? Because what did I say? It goes from a thought to a choice to an action, right? This is that spectrum we're talking about right here. So this is where we create the present moment, right? This is what the present moment becomes. And in the present moment, whether a thought arises, and before we have to make a decision on the action we're going to take, we can make a new choice, in this meditation, right? In this meditative state of the present moment, our goal is to create an environment of the present moment where we can make a new choice so we do not initiate and put us on another karmic loop of a reaction, right? I've talked about this in my other videos, but this is very important information that I want to nail home. And I want to nail this home because what you need to understand is that changing our existence on a quantum level starts in that present moment. Now, what happens when we make a new choice? When we make a new choice in the present moment, we are actually becoming someone new, right? We are overcoming and we are breaking the habit of being ourselves. Now, the biggest thing I want to show you is that in this new moment, you do not need to manifest 7 figures to get the same change and the same spiritual effect of an elevated state of consciousness that you would if you hypothetically had 7 figures, right? So let me break this down for you. It says logarithmic effect. Because a logarithmic effect is what happens when you implant your mind in a certain way. So a logarithmic effect is the idea of the butterfly effect, right? It's that a small disproportionate change can create disproportionate outcomes, right? Now, by no means am I a math major or anything, but this is the type of effect, right, where we plant a seed right here and we just experience this exponential boost, right? Now, if you want to create that effect in the quantum, it starts with small things, right? Like an extra 10 minutes of meditation, or an extra 5 things in your gratitude journal, or the act of surrendering or letting go, right? We surrender a negative emotion, which gives us a new experience. Now, you need to understand this because this is what is actually going down in the quantum field. Because the quantum field only responds to energy, if you are making a choice which leads to an action that holds and carries a certain frequency of abundance, of wealth, right? Gratitude is wealthy because you're signifying to the universe how much you have. The more consistently you do this, if you practice daily gratitude, you are going to find multiple things to be thankful for in the day. Then you are going to see negative things that happen to you as something to be grateful for because it is serving you on this experience. And then you are choosing a new experience in which that divine harmony and that source and that quantum field which you're making contact with by choosing that frequency can start to reorganize itself in the external world because that is where you're placing your time, energy, and attention. This is something super important you need to understand because this is how we use meditation to overcome the withdrawals of the addiction to the familiar experience and to let go, right? That you do not need to make some big change in order to experience that effect in the quantum field. You want to know what I do? On my list of daily habits, I put 1 minute of meditation because I'm lowering the ceiling of output and raising the floor. I'm making it easy for myself to engage in that action because when I engage in that action of 1 minute, I'll go for 5 minutes. I'll be like, I'm already here for 5 minutes. Why don't I go for 10 minutes? And then I get an even more energetic sense of relief for doing that. Now, another thing I want to touch on is that in that moment where you create that gap between an impulse and a reaction, it comes down to a duality of 2 choices. Are you going to be a prisoner of the past or a pioneer of the future? And I'm going to lead into this a little more as we move on to the 5-step meditation, right? So whether you believe it or not, I actually just planted the seeds of the first 2 steps of meditation, right? Step 1 of the meditation is going to be realizing that you need to let go of your old self, right? We let go of our identity on a broad spectrum, just like in a state of meditation, we let go of a thought that does not serve us. Now, the second thing I wanted to highlight on is the cycle, right? what is actually the practice of meditation and why do we use it? The second thing you need to understand about meditation is that you're using it to overcome the withdrawals of the addiction to the familiar experience, to the chemicals in your body that are no longer serving you. Because as soon as your body starts to feel this unfamiliar experience, it's going to do everything in its power to release chemicals and hormones that get you to start thinking these negative thoughts, preventing you from changing. Which is why I introduced you to the cycle, which is the gap between the impulse and action. And now we're going to get on to step 3. So step 3 is going to be what we do when we create that present moment, right? We're going to surrender and let go. Now, why would be the one thing we do when we finally get to a state of change be to surrender and to let go? Because the secret is instead of having to decide between 99 things you do want, which creates dissonance and confusion, you actually just choose not to engage with what you don't want. You know you want a positive experience, and you know that it will come eventually, but the first step is going to be not engaging with the negative experience. This is going to be important to understand because one of my main philosophies that I think will serve you is that this is an active state of meditation. Because think about it. On a small cycle, it's like this. So we have thoughts, and we have emotions, and we have a choice at each stage. Are we going to identify with that thought that creates that emotion, and are we going to feel more of that emotion that creates more thoughts, right? This is going to be a cycle you experience on a micro level. But let's look at a cycle that you're going to experience on a macro level, right? So let's say the addict, the body, is going to be fighting back. It's going to be pulling stimuli from your body, the concept of time, and the environment to create a familiar experience. Now, when this arises, right, something of the ego arises, this is an egoic state. And you are going to have a choice, which is why I brought up the prisoner of the past or the pioneer of the future. Now, I'm realizing my drawing is going a certain way, but you have a choice. Are you going to identify as a prisoner of the past, or are you going to identify as a pioneer of the future? Now, if you identify as a pioneer of the future, you're making a new choice that is going to put you in an unfamiliar experience. And the more consistently you make that choice, it is going to have that energetic, resonant effect on the body and the time and the environment. And the more consistently you do this, the more consistently the natural organizing power of the universe and the harmony is going to serve you in that capacity. Because you're saying, I no longer identify with this familiar self, right? So step 1, letting go of the old you. Step 2, realizing that you can make a choice when you are in a walking set of meditation, right? Step 2 is that choice. And then step 3 is going to be surrendering everything you don't want, right? You're surrendering the familiar experience, which means by a product of that, you are going to start to experience an unfamiliar one, the unknown, and step into a new identity, which is going to channel this energy consistently. Now, I want to introduce you to step 4, which is going to be how you can become a true master of what Joe Dispenza preaches and being in a walking state of meditation at all times. I'm trying to introduce you to these cycles because I want to show you that meditation and gratitude and affirmations aren't just things practiced for 15 minutes a day. That we are consistently engaging with the quantum field. We are consistently sending signals into that place, right? If you can come to the awareness that, hey, everything is a walking state of meditation, then you're going to realize it's not just about those 20 minutes that I choose to sit down and me beginning to wait for the experience to happen. What it actually is you're going to have to understand that you are going to be an active participant in the co-creation of your experience, because a walking state of meditation means you're a co-creator. It means you're going to be picking and choosing the experience you want to have, right? Are you going to pick a certain type of thought? Are you going to pick a certain type of action? Are you going to pick a certain type of emotion? And you pick these things by how you invest your time, energy, and attention, right? Our energetic currency. This is the secret. Now that you understand that when you're in states of meditation and when you're only journaling and experiencing gratitude for 10, 15 minutes a day, you're going to fall back in your own ways, because that just becomes more a passive kind of, I just need to check the box. That in itself can be egoic, because you're like, I'm not willing to fully change, so I'm just going to do the bare minimum right now. No, there are actually two things in which Joe Dispenza found people would experience spontaneous remission, right? Spontaneous remission is when people would overcome chronic illness and they would not know why. The first thing is people who experienced spontaneous remission knew they were connected to a divine field, right? They knew they were connected to an intelligence beyond them, and they knew that they were connected to it and they were communicating with it and they were part of it. The second thing, and it's one of the most powerful things, is that they chose change. People who are experiencing major illness, if they were told they had 6 months to live, in that moment, they would change how they're living. They're like, I'm not going to be stressed over what's going on at work. I'm not going to be stressed over the traffic. I'm going to choose to love my kids with every second I have left. Now, I did not have a chronic illness like that, but when I was in that state of $80,000 in debt and I was smoking weed, there came a point where I literally could not recognize myself. I could not recognize myself, so my entire existence literally severed from that old identity. And once it severed from that old identity, I was like, oh my God, that wasn't me. And I started to give myself empathy, and I started to allow myself to naturally make that change and step into that experience I want to have. How are you co-creating this experience when you're in an active state of meditation, right? Because we know we need to be in an elevated state of emotion. If you engage in the first 3 steps, right? If you understand you need to let go of yourself, and you understand that meditation, or the walking states of meditation, are so we can make a new choice in between that impulse and that reaction, and then you start to engage with step 3, how do we get this elevated state of emotion which the manifestations can come true? We get into that elevated state of emotion when we realize that we actually made a change in our life, right? That's the secret. You can visualize it, and that's where you can experience the elevated state of change, but some people have struggle visualizing. Some people have struggling staying in a state of meditation. So how do you actually get an elevated state of emotion? It is through action, and action is from co-creation. So action just means that you are actively engaging with the experience you want to have. When those people experience spontaneous remission, they say, hey, I'm not going to be a victim anymore. I'm going to love this life while I have it. 6 months left. First of all, a blessing that some of you have more than 6 months left. But that doesn't mean you should go about wasting your time. I encourage you to step into an active state of meditation. And that realization of change and that elevated state of emotion actually moves you into something called a life-affirming energy. So that's going to be point 5 about understanding the meditative process, right? When we create that gap in that present moment and we observe a new change, and that change creates an elevated emotion, what is actually going on there? So, step 5, a life-affirming energy. A life-affirming energy is what happens when the universe or the divine mind starts to repattern and starts to build life out for you, right? This is where I talk about you can just exist in a state of effortless action. Because when you're of an elevated state of consciousness, the energy vortex works in the other direction. So you are no longer, after you let go of your old self, you're going to realize that you can transcend this realm, right? And then what happens to the energy in the higher realms? They're naturally gravitating towards a lighter frequency. It's natural. And because it's natural, it's going to be life affirming. So instead of having energy taken away from you from being in a lower state, energy and inspiration and inspired action are going to naturally come your way because of this. Now, this is so important to understand and we can bring in another one of my favorite teachers here, Dr. David R. Hawkins, is that this creates a quantum shift, right? Because on the spectrum of consciousness, for the sake of a simple drawing, I'll just draw it like this. Level 200 is courage. Now I want you to think this middle point right here is courage. So this is that 200 calibration. When you start to experience courage, you experience a willingness to change. When you experience a willingness to change, you're going to notice that shift. When you notice that shift, you're going to collapse in elevated emotion with the realization of a new experience, and you're going to reprogram your subconscious mind. So I didn't list off crazy things like start a business, go run a marathon to get an elevated state of emotion. I listed off, hey, maybe start meditating for 1 minute, which will parlay into 5, which will parlay into 10. Start a gratitude journal, stay consistent, talk about reasons you love yourself, because those are going to put you in elevated state of emotions. And you're like, hey, it wasn't that bad. I engaged with something. Then you're going to have that realization that moves you into a higher state, and you're going to finally understand that you are creating change and you are no longer bound by the experience you do not want to have. Now, manifestation isn't just about getting stuff. What it actually is about aligning with the high frequency. Got to use purple for this. You ever notice that the energetic spectrum of light is also the same color as the chakras? So like the crown chakra, the highest one, is also what they use for the Tao or pure consciousness. Now, what I want you to understand about these elevated states is that manifestation isn't about getting things. It's about becoming the version of you that resonates at the frequency that creates a more abundant and better experience for all parties involved. So manifesting isn't actually just for you, it's for you and all the people you come across. Because yes, I did manifest the 7-figure business, but I showed up as a better son. I showed up as a better friend. I showed up as a better business partner because I was resonating at a more abundant frequency. How you do one thing is how you do everything. And that's why this information is so powerful. And this is why the shift happens at a quantum level. And this is the energetics behind it. Because the more you experience that abundance and the more you collapse realities where you're engaging with the active states of the reality you want to experience, you're going to have those life-affirming energies working in your favor. So I want you to refine why you want something. Because when you shift from a survival and fear-based state, which is all me, to a, hey, how does my desires and what do I want to manifest impact my life for the better, but it also impact the collective? And that's going to be a magical experience for all parties involved. So quickly, let's summarize the 5 different things and synthesize it and bring it on home. So step 1 is going to be getting rid of the old you, or at least becoming aware of it, right? Step 2 is going to be the impulse cycle, that we'll call it, right? That's where we create the space in between impulse and action. I'm just going to call it impulse cycle. Step 3 is going to be letting go and surrendering, right? This is what we do when we create that present moment here, right? To become aware of ourselves, or the version of ourselves we want to let go of, we meditate. To realize that, hey, we were just stitching an identity to the experience we don't want to have. We can use that impulse cycle and the act of letting go in order to surrender the experience we do not want to have, which is where we create a gap in between an impulse and a reaction, and we can start to engage in co-creation, right? 4 is going to be the co-creation. That in this moment, you have a choice. Are you going to be a prisoner of the past? Or are you going to pioneer the future, right? And the more consistently you make a conscious choice in alignment with the new reality you want to experience, we move on to step 5. This is where that natural organizing power of the universe starts to work in your favor. When that natural organizing power of the universe starts to work in your favor, that's where we start to experience life affirming energies. And this is the 5-step active meditation cycle that allowed me to let go of the old version of me and brainwash myself to make over 7 figures. Now, this isn't just some meditation that I wanted to give you that you could turn on for 20 minutes and hopefully, wishfully think for things to happen. This is the actual 5-step process that not only Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about, but some of the greatest sages and teachers of all time talk about. Because real change only starts when you make a choice. And if you do not make a choice, you will not change. So if you like this video, make sure to drop a like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.